welcome to Write with Courage. I'm Victoria Sullivan, and I have a special guest today. I am being joined by Senator Lang.
I am not Brittany, yes, that's
You are
true.
not
I am
Brittany.
not Brittany. She has way bit nicer hair than I do. But yeah, nice to be here, Victoria.
You're going to have to slide in, I think, for that microphone.
All right, there we go.
It's real. Some people
Okay.
think it's like fake because it looks so pretty,
proppy,
but it's
yeah,
actually real. And you should know because you do, in your real life, you do sound and engineering and that kind of thing.
I do work for Live Nation and manage concerts. So.
Awesome. So I wanted to bring Senator Lang on because there is so much conversation happening around education finance. And it's a very mucky kind of thing to understand. It's very complicated, and as much as you have tried to make the formula a little simpler, it is very complicated.
It absolutely is a complicated process.
And so there's a lot of people that are on social media right now spreading misinformation, and I wanted to have the opportunity to just lay it out so that you guys can see what education funding actually looks like in the state of New Hampshire. We'll touch on some other things too, but we can bring it home. Senator Lang did a great job breaking down some numbers for me for the city of Manchester, and we can go over some of that and hopefully answer a lot of the questions that you guys have. If you've got more, post them underneath the Facebook Live. We'll be answering them. We can answer them for you in the comments there. And all right, so let's start with the budget. Okay, this is what it looks like. This is what the budget looks like when you break it down. The big green area is Health and Human Services, and then education is the second largest funding.
Absolutely true.
Right?
Right.
So when people are they're saying like the state doesn't give enough money back, is the second largest thing that we fund.
It is. It absolutely is. And it's it's a complicated formula. There are some people who only want to look at one line in a budget and say, oh, this is education, right? But it's not. There are huge portions of education that we fund. Some is based on our simple education formula. Some is outside the formula, dealing with special education and other services that we provide that are outside the basic formula.
Right. So we're going to go into some of those. I want to start also by saying that the EFA percentage, the amount of students, the percentage of funding that goes into EFAs, look at this. All of that blue-purple is all the other education spending in the state. And that little tiny sliver, that's education freedom accounts. So the myth out there is that education freedom accounts are bankrupting schools and property taxes are increased because of education freedom accounts. And education freedom accounts, those families still pay into all of their property taxes. And their children only get to use the state portion. So if they sent their child to a Manchester school, between the state portion and the local funding, plus in Manchester, likely there's more funding attached to that because Manchester has more funding. You would be looking at somewhere around $18,000-$19,000 a child, even maybe up to $21,000 depending on the child. If they're using EFAs, it's like $4,200. Are we still at that mark, about $4,200?
Yeah, a little bit more than that, but it's a little bit more. But again, when I did the breakdown in Manchester based on the latest funding, it's $20,063 per student.
Right, so $20,063 per student. And of the state funding, it's about $11,000.
No, well, depends on. So again, it depends on where you formula. Our base aid for EFAs.
No, for Manchester.
Oh yeah. So I didn't look up that statistic. I should have looked at what your gross was.
It was basically across the state.
Yeah.
It's coming in roughly at about $7,100 per child. And then for Manchester, it's coming in a little bit higher because of free and reduced lunch, IEPs, that sort of thing. The average is about $11,000 per child from the state.
Right. The idea is that not every community is the same, and so we've done targeted aid. Like I was usually discussion around Rye. The average home price is $1.8 million for a house in Rye, but in Pittsfield, in Charlestown, it's $480,000. Right. So do you want to treat those two towns exactly the same, given the equalized valuation and the value of the homes in there? So we break it down in the state, and we try to do much more targeted aid to help those communities that can't afford to raise their property taxes. You'll basically utterly be taxing people out, like Charlestown, like Berlin, like Claremont. Claremont gets over $14,000 per student, and they sued us because we don't give them enough.
Well, I really wish that our local government was as considerate with our tax dollars as the state has been. Yeah, so if we break down Manchester, the Manchester budget, I think I've got something on there for the Manch budget. Do you have that, Brendan? There we go. 34% increase in the budget in 10 years. Right?
Big number.
Right. So, and again, Senator Lang broke this all down for me. So we had a 34% increase in the budget in 10 years and a 4.3 increase in population. So from 2016, we started at 11,903. I'm sorry, 100. I can't. That doesn't glare.
111,000.
1,903 citizens. And in 2025, we had 116,818. So it's a 4.3% increase in population and a 34% increase in our budget.
Right.
That's insane.
Again, so the idea that people have to understand that taxation is a direct result of what you choose to spend money on, right? And that divorcing that, like, if you ever try to let one group decide spending and another group decide your revenue, right? And your revenue is driven strictly by spending, you'll bankrupt everybody.
Right.
Right? Is that, the one thing I've learned so again, my background, I've been on the town budget committee, I've been on the school board budget committee, been on the school board. Now I'm in Ways and Means as the chair in the Senate, and I'm also on finance, the spending side. When I was in municipalities, we never looked at revenue until the end.
Right.
Right? We didn't look at how much money do we have to spend.
Which is crazy. So on the state level, we look at revenues and Ways and
First.
Means. We're looking at the revenues, and we say, okay, so based on projections, this is the amount of money we're going to have to work with. Yep. Then we send that over to finance, and they're like, okay, well, of all of these things that need money spent on, how do we prioritize this so that we stay within our means?
Right.
Ways and Means, right? And then on the city level and town level, they say, how much money do we want to spend? Okay, so then we're going to tell the people that we have to raise all of their taxes to meet our spending. It's absolutely lopsided.
Absolutely backwards. Again, and I'll be honest, when I was on the locals, I never thought about it because I didn't know there was a difference, right? So I always did it we looked at the spending. The departments came in and said, this is what we want. And we decided what it looked like. And then once we got it all done, we looked at what's the tax implication of this? And most of the times, you've already voted on those items 3-4 times, so you're not going to retreat from them because you already said they're important and you don't want to spend money on it, and now you're stuck raising taxes. Whereas, like you said, in the state, you and I on Ways and Means, we first go through revenues, and we give basically, here's your maximum expenditure, right? Because we're a balanced budget state. We have to stay within our revenues, and so we look at the revenues first. We have meetings with businesses and economics, the state agencies, and we talk to everybody about what's it look like for revenue. And then we have to make a determination. We make that determination, we give it to finance, and finance has to craft a budget to that number.
And we were pretty much, it's a bipartisan committee, like all committees are in the State House, and we were pretty much in line with each other. Mm-hmm. Some of us bucked you a little bit, although I think we might be right in where you said we were going to be. We erred on the side of caution. Yes. Is what we did. And we came to agreements together about what it was going to look like for the state. We stayed within our means. And, again, we were a little on the cautious side just to make sure that we weren't going to the people at the end of the year saying, we fell short, we got to, figure out something. So the towns and cities should have to be that responsible to the people as well.
I do. Again, if I was on the town's budget committees or the school budget committees, I would invert my process. I would say, first, let's look at how many building permits we issued last year. What does that mean for our equalized valuation base? What does that adjust for our tax rate if we were to do the same exact budget today, but all these new buildings now in the mix for paying taxes?
This will blow your mind. In Manchester, not only did they override the tax cap, which was supposed to be only for an emergency, and almost everybody that voted to override the tax cap ran on not overriding the tax cap. They don't actually know what that's going to look like.
But
they don't know how much that actually is. It could be 6%, could be 9%, could be 11%. They don't know how much they're actually going to crush us with. And June Trisciani, who is one of our aldermen here, alderman at large, was at a meeting, and she actually mocked people. Because, you're knocking on doors. I'm knocking on doors. I'm hearing about the property taxes and how afraid people actually are. And when I brought that up, she said, we're not going to buy into this fear mongering of people losing their houses nonsense. This is
Wait.
what people are actually saying to us, and this is an actual, it's not just a fear, it's a reality for a lot of folks.
It is. Again, that concept of you have to be respectful of the taxpayer, right? Their pockets are only so deep, and when you start, going too deep, you're going to have a problem. And we're hearing that. I mean, the state's being responsive as we can. We look at things like rooms and meals revenue, right? So we are giving back more than ever before. We've increased it since 2020. We've increased the rooms and meals distribution to towns by over 104%.
Yeah, I think we've
more
got
than
that
doubled.
here. Meals and rooms. Brendan, can we see the meals and rooms slide? There we go. Rooms and meals distribution.
Yep.
So statewide, in fiscal year 2016, it was 63.8 million. In fiscal year 2025, it was 136.6 million. And out of that, in fiscal year 2016, Manchester got 5.2 million, and this year it got $11.3 million.
Right. So we're definitely trying to be responsive at the state. When we had back when we had $500 million surpluses, we went around towns. We gave out checks.
So I figured that out. That should have been about $200 per homeowner in Manchester that they got back.
Yeah.
Instead, they increased your taxes. our
Well, again,
taxes.
I had this discussion with the I think it was the city mayor or the town manager of Laconia, where they said, oh, the state reduced their funding to us. I'm like, wait, explain that to me. And it was these one-time funds we gave them, said, hey, use this to repair a roof or to put a new window in. Don't use it to hire people, right?
Right.
Not long-term spending, right? Because you're only getting this once. They use it to hire people, then complain when we didn't give them the money the second year because we didn't have the surplus.
What year was it that Manchester got like 25 million dropped in their lap?
So, well, that was the last budget cycle, I think. It was when I modified the education funding formula and I created the new extraordinary needs grant, and we dumped a bunch of money into education. I think it was Manchester got $21 million
Yeah.
new in education funding formula.
Do you know what happened?
Yeah.
They raised our taxes.
Oh.
They spent every dime and raised our taxes. And I even had one of the school board members admit that at a meeting. Like, you were not expecting $21 million.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of using that to pay down some debt maybe for the school district, or God forbid, give tax relief to the taxpayers, not only do you spend every dollar of it, but then you raise taxes above that level.
Again, that's the idea that the state's not sharing revenue and giving revenue to communities is not just an outright lie, right? We've increased it over and over again. Our per pupil spending, like I said, in 2000, I'm trying to remember what the number was, but our per pupil spending in 2016, which is the year before you and I took off, well, I don't know, you might have been here before me, but I think my 17 was my first year in the legislature.
Yeah, I was looking for you.
And so, but the number was around $3,500. We're at $7,100 per pupil. So
Isn't that just about what the Supreme Court suggested that we give?
yeah, well, again, this is the idea
Right.
that we're not giving back to communities. It just
want to
doesn't
reiterate
work.
that just a little bit, because we didn't do that because the Supreme Court ordered it, because they can't.
No,
They're
right.
We're separate branches of government. They can't tell us what to do. People misinterpreted that because the Supreme Court didn't actually, demand it either. They said
Right.
this is what we think that it should look like,
Right.
and we were able to get there on our own based on just funding formulas and where we
Right.
were with revenues in the state, and so that's where we're at. And then people are still like, not enough. So you may ask people this question too, and I do, and maybe next week when Brittany's here, I don't want to put you on the spot, I'll put up some of those comments that people make, and I'll say, like, what is the magic number? And somebody said, well, you're the state legislator, you tell us what the magic number. I'm like, we did, and you're telling us it's not enough, so what is the number? And then other people are like, well, the number, someone said, the number is whatever the school wants. I said, so some schools are 44,000. Should it be 44,000 per student?
Right.
They're like, at least. So, like, that's not sustainable. That's not what we can do to our taxpayers.
Well, exactly right. New Hampshire, so when you look at average spending per pupil in the country, the median, in the middle for the United States is $17,000. That's the average. There's some below that and there's some above that, but $17,000. New Hampshire, we're at $23,000 plus.
And
$1,000 per pupil in education spending.
And another argument people make is, yeah, but New Hampshire is among the lowest in state contribution. Well, if you look at it on a percentage-wise, if we're giving between $7,000 and $11,000 per student, which is what we're doing, but the town is saying that we need $44,000 to educate a child, yes, we're definitely going to look like we're on the lower side of that.
Absolutely right. When you're at top end of the spending scale, and we're on top par with other states when it comes to revenue. If you look at the median, right, we're given the right amount of money, right? But the problem is that we're choosing to spend more, which is a local decision, and I'm completely okay with that. If you choose to, but there's a tax implication to your choice. Yeah. And it shows up on your side of the ledger, not the state side, because we don't do spending, we do revenue, right? And so we give you a certain base to help you. Yep. And then, but when towns choose to go beyond the norm, someone that was telling me, I think it was Kearsarge, had a warrant article that capped the amount of spending per pupil at $28,000, and it got amended on the floor to $44,000. Wow. And it was passed. And it passed. At
$44,000 a student. Oh my gosh.
So that was what they said would be our cap. We're going to agree to not spend more than that number.
That's Derryfield, which is a private, like an elite private school. That's what they charge for tuition.
So again, just the idea that you're trying to separate spending from revenue, right, and the tax implications of spending. Again, every time you choose to raise spending in a municipality or a school district, you're choosing to take money out of a citizen's pocket.
Yeah. We've also got here, did we do statewide enrollment yet?
So statewide enrollment's way down, right? So you pull it up there, statewide enrollment, right? So in 16, it was 172,000. Now it's 148,000. Yeah. In the last 10 years, right, we've lost 20,000 kids plus.
Yeah. People aren't having as many babies.
Yeah. And when you look at free and reduced, this is an interesting statistic. Everyone was saying that more people are struggling and needing more help, and yet statistically that's not true. Right, we had 49,000.
Oh, Brendan, can you pop it back up there for a second? Sorry.
49,000 people on free and reduced in 16. We only have 38,000 now. Now that's still too big of a number, right? But that idea that that's a big driver, right? Look at the per pupil spending. In 16, the state spending number was 5.4K. In 27, it's 7.1. Again, we're giving more and more money
per student
to municipalities.
So, like, part of my district is Litchfield. Litchfield is going to see a slight reduction next year in their education funding because they have their enrollment has decreased. So when people see that, like, we just need you to understand that we're paying down more per student, but you've got less students to educate. And that's not anything the state is doing. That is, people are having less babies.
Well, in the last 10 years, Manchester alone has lost 15% of its student count. Right? But you went from 13,338 students in 16 to 11,363 students in 27 this year.
So can you bring up the FTE slide for me, Brendan? There we go. So fiscal year 16, 1,676 employees. So you had teachers, 1,000, and this is all Manchester, right? 1,002 teachers. Instructional support was 306, which is like your paras and stuff. Yeah. Librarians, media specialists, 23. Other specialists, 129, so that's probably special education, right? Admin support, 42. Others is 174. We don't know what the others is, right?
That's as reported. It's by how the town reports it to the Department of Education.
Okay, so that could be substitute teachers, coaches, cleaning people, whatever. Okay, fiscal year 25 now, 9 years later, 1,689 teachers. So it jumped up.
That's employees. 1,689 employees.
I'm sorry, employees. Right? For teachers, it's 1,001, so that stayed almost the same. Instructional support, 270. Librarians, 20. Specialists, 130. Administrative support, 42. And other, 223.
Right. And again, when you measure that against the enrollment, 15% enrollment decrease.
Right. So that's where the money is. Right? So the money is that they're not adjusting their budget based on the declining enrollment and the fact that they have to educate less students. They're actually increasing the number of staff that they have.
Right.
And that's where our money is.
Well, again, anybody who ran a business or is in business knows that your labor costs are generally your largest portion of your cost. If you need to make adjustments, that's where you're going to find the most amount of money and play an adjustment. But, I would say nobody wants to fire their kid's teacher, right? And so it makes school districts tougher to adjust labor workforces because nobody wants to do that. And so.
But they added.
Well, that's it. They had a reduction of 15%.
This wasn't even like, I don't want to let Mrs. Johnson go. This is like, we added a lot more teachers or support staff or whatever. And we know the administrative costs have gone through the roof.
Yeah, they've added more overall employees with a 15% reduction in actually the number of students they're educating.
And I think for most cities and towns, from budgets that I've looked at, the city or statewide, the municipal spending has remained pretty safe, pretty standard, right? And the significant increase we're seeing is on the education side.
Yeah, most municipalities do a really great job when it comes to operating the town or operating the city, right? They do a pretty tight job there. It's in the education side that the spending is going out of control, where we see, again, a 15% reduction in population and an increase in the number of people to teach a smaller population.
So in Ward 8, this lovely man put up a post about me. He put it up everywhere. It was a weird little quote that I saw quite a bit one day. It says, Victoria Sullivan voted to prevent $10 million from going to Manchester schools and now is campaigning on supporting public schools. But wait, there's more. Sullivan voted for the final 2025 state budget legislation that imposes a roughly $10 million annual adequacy aid cap currently affecting only Manchester, although she had previously voted for an amendment that would have eliminated that cap and also supported delaying the implementation. But that vote doesn't matter because she ultimately caved in supporting stripping Manchester specifically of millions. So he says, I voted, he states, like, I voted for the money for Manchester, but it doesn't matter because it didn't pass, right? So this is what this is what I'm going to say to all the Democrats. You can take it down, Brendan. Not one Democrat voted for the budget. So if that is the case, then you all voted to defund everything. We were days away from a government shutdown when it came to the budget. They were not going to vote for education funding, special education funding, money for food banks, money for Medicare expansion, money for hospitals, parks, nothing. They were going to let everything stop. Like this was DC and we were doing DC style politics. We didn't even know how to manage that because New Hampshire has never done that. We didn't know how to do a continuing resolution because we've never come to an impasse on a budget like that before.
That's not true. We've had a continuing back when we were in the House. We went to October.
Oh, that's right. I was one of the legislative terrorists. I forgot. I wouldn't vote
back
for the
when we were in the
budget 'cause it was
House, we
too
went to
high.
October before we had a working budget. We did continuing resolution, which is basically continuing state spending at the previous level with a slight increase to deal with contractual obligations.
That's right. We did do it that year.
And so we did a continuing resolution in 17, I think it was. But yeah, the idea, like, the budget is a compromised
But
budget.
I think the governor said she wasn't going to do a continuing resolution. There was something like
this
we were
year.
at a stop. Like we were out of time, out of
but
solutions.
all budgets are a compromised budget, right? We added things back in. We have to negotiate with the House as well, right?
Exactly.
So the Senate, we adjusted the budget. We put things like they had reduced the Medicare rates, so we put money back into that to keep our Medicare rates for our physicians higher. We put back some spending for the Office of the Child Advocate. They had stripped it and zeroed out the budget.
Yes.
We put money back in to allow to
Which I
keep
advocated for, even though there are people that keep saying that I voted to defund that. With Senator Carson and Representative Rice, were the ones that said, no, like we sit on the Office of Child, we sit on the Oversight Commission for Children's Services. We need that office. That office was put in place for a reason. So we advocated for that to get put back in after the House took it out, and the Senate put it back in.
Yep. But again, you get to the very end, right? You have a budget, and it's the budget, right? You've got to work within the budget lines of the revenue that we have. And like I said, they didn't like it. They wanted us to increase taxes somewhere and spend more. I mean, we saw, $1.75 billion in spending requests?
Yeah, let's just say that again.
Yeah.
1.7, you don't often hear about the bills that we don't pass, right? So $1.75 billion in new spending. And when they were asked how to pay for it, they couldn't tell us. And the only revenue that we had to play with was property taxes.
Right.
So that would have meant almost $2 billion increase in property taxes for every homeowner in New Hampshire, and we killed all of that. And I'm just telling you right now, like, I know my opponent is saying that he's gonna fund all the things, but bring down property taxes.
Right.
You can't do both. You can't do both things. You have to make sure that you, like, that's just budgeting, that's math.
So it was, I mean, when they were talking about one of the spending bills, I was in my office and I had the TV on, I was listening to it in the background. And I got so annoyed, I got up, went to the committee room, filled out the sheet to speak, so I could talk about the fact that they had half a bill. It was that particular bill was $536 million in new spending. And I'm like, you have half a bill. You've spent the money, where you're getting it from.
Right.
Right? No answer. Crickets. Right? They had no idea. Right? So they're more than willing to dump the spending on, but they want to answer the hard question. Where are you getting the money? Are you going to defund state police? Are you going to defund Department of Environmental Services? Are you going to take down Medicaid money?
Well, there was though, but they did go on the State House steps and give their plan for that. And that was, I mean, not in that committee, but there was a solution in their eyes, and that was the 3-3 plan, which is to put a $3 per thousand new housing fee on top of the property taxes you're already paying, plus give you the gift of a 3%
Income tax.
income tax. 3% income tax on top of that. That's their gift to you. 3% on top of what you're paying, $3 per thousand on top of what you're paying now, and a 3% income tax.
Again, and no city or state has lowered overall voter or citizen tax burden by implementing a new tax.
Let me tell you about Connecticut. I had to drive through Connecticut this weekend to drive my son to college. Connecticut has some of the highest taxes in the country. They've got income tax, they've got sales tax, they've got property tax, they've got all of it. And they actually put in an income tax to bring down property taxes, but it didn't. It increased property taxes because no one's ever going to, stop spending money.
Yep.
The roads were atrocious. Like I felt like I was bahaing on the back roads of New Hampshire. Like I was all over the place. The roads were all torn up and they were a mess. For our little state with the budget that we have, we do so much better with the money that we have here.
So on that,
thanks to Republican leadership.
I did a bunch of research because again, we're talking about, do we do a broad-based tax, sales tax? Do we do an income tax? What does that mean to our citizens? Will it actually lower the tax burden if you spread it out more on average, right? The answer is no. It doesn't, right? So I took all of the New England states and I calculated what's the overall tax burden. When you factor in the fact that you have to pay property tax, so that you're going to pay a sales tax, and you're going to pay an income tax, right? And I just use those three as metrics. If you had property taxes, income tax, and sales tax, New Hampshire's still the lowest state in all of New England, right? Our citizens pay less on average in taxes than all the other New England states.
And we're going to leave you with that because we're out of time. Thank you so much, Senator Lang, for joining me. Thank you all. Remember to have a great week and walk right with courage.
Say what you wanna say.